Hi guys, my name is Sydney Brown, and this is my end of semester project on interpersonal communication. What is interpersonal communication? Interpersonal communication refers to the messages sent and received between two people, and it's also the way people connect with one another. First, we're going to go over the elements of interpersonal communication, starting with the sender. The sender is the person who decides to communicate and what the intent of the message is. So, for example, since I'm talking right now, I would be the sender element of communication. The next element we have is the receiver element, and the receiver is the person who decodes the message and tries to understand what the source of the message is. We are both simultaneously the sender and receiver. So that's why for the picture, I included the sender and receiver both talking and both having conversation because we do both at the same time. The next element we have is the message, and the message is any type of textual, verbal, or nonverbal aspect of communication in which individuals give meaning. I decided for my picture to use a nonverbal aspect of this and go with people texting. The next element we have is the channel, and a channel is the medium in which we communicate our message. You can have multiple things as a channel, not only face-to-face communication. This also includes our smartphones, like the texting, and also social media that we use to communicate through, such as Twitter, Instagram, email, etc. The next element we have is the feedback element, which comes from the receiver. And so basically this is the response to the message. And that's why for these images, I use people looking shocked, because as the receiver, you would have that reaction to what the sender is saying to you. The next element we have is your environment, and your environment is going to be the context or situation where communication happens and how it affects your experience. So basically, for an example of environment, it would be like the difference how you talk to an authority figure, like your professor, versus how you would talk to your friend group. And it also would be your topic of conversation, your tone, and your volume of talking to people in the library versus how you would talk to people at a bar or any other type of social gathering. The last element of communication is going to be your noise, and your noise is anything that interferes with the message. So noise keeps your message from being completely understood by the receiver. That's why for noise, for this picture, I decided to do this guy talking and then all the lines jumbling up in the middle, and the girl has a question mark over her head because she's not understanding what was said by the sender. Now, there are 4 types of noise. And that first type of noise is going to be physical. So anything that comes from like a physical actual object. So for example, loud music playing that would have you not hear what the person said, or lots of voices overlapping for the same thing. And basically, excuse me, anything just physical like that. The next type of noise is going to be your psychological noise, which is what's going on in your head that takes you out of the conversation. So basically, you're going through a breakup, your dog just died, you just failed your midterm, things like that. The next we have semantic, which deals with language and language barriers. So this could be somebody's accent or connotative definitions of words that somebody doesn't understand. And the last type of noise you're going to have is your physiological noise. And so this is basically your actual physical body blocking you from understanding the message. So basically, for example, like if I was deaf, I would not be able to hear what you're saying to me, or if I was blind, I would not be able to see what you're showing me, etc., etc. Next, we're going to be moving on to models of communication. And first, we have the Osgood and Schramm communication model. Now, I made the image of this model myself, and it really shows how you are all the encoder, interpreter, and decoder all at the same time. And it also, the arrows show the circularness of the model to show that communication is everlasting. Now, some more about this model. Before the Osgood and Schramm model came out, the linear model by Laswell was used in the 1940s. So what Osgood and Schramm found out was wrong with this model is that communication is not linear. And in that model, there was a distinct point where communication started and when it ended, when in reality, communication is never ending at all. So this model is also nicknamed the circular model because, as you can see in this picture I made right here, it goes in a circular motion and the arrows never stop because communication never stops. So this model shows the feedback part from the receiver and how it's interpreted and what's said back, so we can show that communication is never ending. The next model I went over was Barnlund's transactional model of communication, and I also made this image of the model myself. And this model also takes into account the background noise and things like that, and also both sides being the communicator. And there's something cool about this model, actually. Let's get into it. This is the first model that shows how we are both the sender and receiver simultaneously. So in the other models, there's a big distinction between who the sender is of a message and who's receiving the message. And this model actually shows and takes into account to everything that we are both the sender and receiver simultaneously while communication is happening. So now something I found really personally interesting this semester, like even before we went over it, was the methods to managing conflict. I think about this all the time when like seeing my friends like argue or other people argue and things like that and how it's being handled. Like I love to just think like, why did they handle it that way? Why are they thinking like that? Like things like that. I don't know. I'm really into it. So, Richard E. Walton and Robert B. McKersey came up with these conflict management strategies, and it's cool to see that the ways people handle conflict, there's actually like a strategy and a process to it. So first we have integrative conflict, which is also known as the win-win solution, because both parties come together and they settle an agreement that is mutually beneficial and they compromise with one another. The next conflict managing strategy is going to be your distributive conflict, which is known as the win-lose situation. So basically, one party does not care to compromise. They don't care for anything to be mutually beneficial. They think that their idea is right. They want their idea to win, and they want the other person's idea to lose. So, continuing the theme of conflict, I also listed the ABC conflicts test because of like how interesting I find this topic. So the ABCs actually stands for avoiders, battlers, and collaborators, and this test helps you find out which conflict management type you are. So at the top, we have the strongly agree, disagree, neutral agree, and strongly agree, and these are all numbered 1 through 4. So basically, you go through all these questions and you go with the number that best fits how you would handle the situation, if you would disagree with it, if you would strongly agree with it, things like that. And through this test, you can find out which type of conflict management type you are. So next, I decided to go over the verbal elements of communication just because we were talking about verbal and nonverbal earlier. So the first element we have is semantic, which is going to be your dictionary definition of a word. And this also changes depending on the context, it's being used in. So for example, we have that building's on fire, where the building is genuinely actually on fire versus saying to someone, your outfit is fire, which just means you have a really good outfit on. The next we have is syntactic, and this governs how we help guide the words we use, such as your grammar, your sentence structure, and your punctuation. So for the example I love to cook my family and my dog, which kind of sounds like she's saying she likes to actually cook her family and cook her dog. Then we have the comma separating it, saying, I love to cook my family and my dog, which is basically just a list of the things she loves. Last but not least, we have pragmatic, and this helps us interpret it messages by fully understanding the interaction and the context of the situation. So for an example, hearing, we need to talk later from a friend you haven't heard from in a while feels a lot better than hearing that exact same sentence, we need to talk later from your boss. Because personally, I'd be really scared if my boss said that to me. Now we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I decided to put this in here just because in any communications class I've ever taken, like since high school, I feel like we've been learning about this and it's super important and it's really real life applicable and things like that. So starting at the bottom of the pyramid, we have your physiological needs, which are your needs for survival. So your food, your water, your shelter, how you survive. And then moving on to safety, that's going to be your need for security and protection. So basically, your protection is going to be the type of house you have. And by the house you have, you would need a good job, so your employment, and you would need to buy health care, so your family health, and things like that. Having that safety and protection is a human need. Then we have love and belonging. And so that's the need to feel belonged to somebody and loved by people, whether that be a platonic friendship, an intimate relationship, your family, etc. Then we have your esteem. And so this is your need for contentness and your need to achieve self-actualization. So this is going to be your confidence, your status, how other people look at you, your own achievements, things like that. And then moving on to the top of the list, self-actualization, which is realizing your full potential. You have total self-fulfillment, you have total creativity, you know you have all these other needs leading up to the top of the pyramid, etc. You have self-actualized. So now the rest of this is just going to be my image citations and also my article citations. And that is my end of semester project.